really, really exciting because we know your biological age is going to be more predictive of health outcomes than just your chronological age. It makes up 80% of your health outcomes, where genetics only makes up 20%, and you're in control of it.
Yeah.
So it puts the power back into your hands. But even when you look on the inside, something is happening on the cellular level. And that's really the definition of biological age.
Based on the data that you've seen, what are the biggest things that accelerate aging?
The top factors that accelerate aging by far, I think, is inflammation,
Yeah.
chronic inflammation.
All right, Hannah, welcome to the Biohacking Beauty podcast.
Thanks, Imate. I'm excited to be here and chat with you.
Yeah. So I'm very excited. As I told you off air, we don't bring a lot of diagnostics tools here. Only ones that we think are revolutionary, and I'm very excited to have you on. Before we get into the really cool science behind, biological aging, I would love to hear a bit about your background. What got you into the world of epigenetics and longevity?
Yeah, definitely. I will rewind all the way to when I was a little girl. I remember I was just obsessed with science and the way the world works. So I knew I was going to go into some type of field. I bounced between different professions. Do I want to become a healthcare provider, some type of physician? Wanted to be a veterinarian at one point. I thought I was going to veterinary school, but I really ended up wanting to go more in the realm of some type of genetic work. I thought
Mhm.
genetic counseling was actually perfect because you get the science and you get the counseling and the interaction with humans. Turns to find out, though, my journey changed when I took a really unique position at a compounding pharmacy outside of college that specialized in unique peptide formulations and products. That's where my entire life changed. I remember my life before that moment and after that moment.
Yeah.
That's where I was really exposed to the cash pay medicine space with your integrative, functional, anti-aging doctors. So I really had an entirely new outlook on medicine and the way that patients are treated. But one of the issues with the peptides is there wasn't enough objective data behind them.
Mhm.
Everyone always felt good from them subjectively. So we wanted to really work to change that in that field. And by we, I mean the partners at the pharmacy. So we really identified aging as a way to measure the efficacy of different products. And then you think to yourself, well, how do you measure aging?
Yeah.
And you can do that through grip strength, gait speed, maybe even looking at someone. And we'll talk about that later, their facial aging and
Mhm.
imaging. But we were ready when the luck was happening, which was really when epigenetics was booming as a field as well. So I flew out with a couple of partners to visit Dr. Steve Horvath, the pioneer in this epigenetic space, who will probably win a
Yeah.
Nobel Prize for his work. And a couple other companies out there wanting to originally partner because it's really hard to start a business, as you know.
Yeah.
And no one really saw the same vision that we did. So we actually flew back to Lexington, Kentucky, and made the decision to build the lab from the ground up. And that's really how TruDiagnostic was born and how we got into the epigenetic space. So it was just that one goal to really start out, which was basically to create the best biological age test ever created to date.
Yeah. It's very interesting, and I think it was before it's it was a little bit kind of before its time as far as understanding there is a large market, I think, for it, because right now, I'm invested in companies that are, in the omics sciences. I think it is, if you ask ChatGPT, it is definitely one of the futures, the hottest kind of commodities in the future, right? But I think when you guys started, how long ago did this start? It was like
Yeah,
pre-COVID,
we
was it?
launched right before COVID,
Yeah,
actually. So it was really unique, though, because we had an audience at the pharmacy, right? So we
yeah,
were trying to convert a lot of those cash pay physicians to this testing, saying, hey, quantify that what you're doing is benefiting your patient. I mean, you're
yeah.
reducing their risk for almost every single disease and even death itself. This testing can help you actually prove that model out.
You can't change what you can't measure.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Thanks to that quote by Peter Drucker, we
yeah, yeah,
use it a
yeah.
lot.
That's very interesting. So, and I think what is interesting that True Diagnostic is doing something. It's not just lip service. Like I think you guys are doing some really cutting edge work in within the field of like biological age testing. For people who are might like not be familiar, maybe you could break down the difference between chronological age, how many birthdays you've had, and biological age.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Imitate. So your chronological age is how many birthdays you've had, how old you truly are, the trips you've taken around the sun. And as we know it, chronological age is linear, right? It only goes up. We can't
Yeah,
really say we're younger because it's the actual time we've spent on Earth.
yeah,
Where let's say you go back, I just got an invite to one of my reunions for high school. Let's say I go to that reunion, everyone is mostly my same chronological age, maybe give or take
yeah,
a couple years older and younger. But we should all look, or the question is, why don't we all look the same, right? If we are
yeah,
that same chronological age. And it's because we're all undergoing different life experiences.
yeah.
Some of us are maybe consuming more alcohol, eating really bad food, not taking care of our bodies. And some of us are maybe doing the complete opposite. So you're going to see that difference phenotypically on the outside. But even when you look on the inside, something is happening on the cellular level. And that's
Uh-huh.
really the definition of biological age. How are we aging individually? And we know
Mhm.
that's really important, and we know that's happening because we're all not getting the same diseases at the same time. We all,
Yeah,
again, just back to that simple example of not looking the same. So it's something we can measure now, and it's really, really exciting because we know your biological age is going to be more predictive of health outcomes than just your chronological age.
definitely. I think it is the only reason you would even use biological age in anything is because you cannot measure enough into the biochemistry. Like I maybe in the future you would be allowed to drive a car, drink alcohol, and make other life-changing decisions only according to your biological age or your brain development or whatever that is. Maybe, I don't know.
I think so. I think too when you go to the doctor's office, right? Obviously they have your birthday, and they'll eventually maybe ask, hey, what's your chronological birthday? And then what's your biological age? And again, who knows what the future holds, but maybe there's a device or a machine you can touch or put a sample into, and it can spit out kind of your biological age and a couple minutes even. We're not there yet. We're definitely not there yet. But this technology is just advancing rapidly. I know you mentioned AI earlier. I don't know if you've messed with any of the deep learning kind of models that ChatGPT has come out with recently, but I mean, we're on the growth spurt right
Yeah.
now, right? Where there's really interesting technology coming out where I think we'll really really be able to excel this field.
Yeah, I think we are dealing with them a lot, and I think there are. I think most people don't realize how much things are going to change. Even things that we deem extremely fundamental, like our entire health system. Like our entire health system right now, is predicated on um, pretty set of algorithms or conditions that are filled pretty much. The deviation is very small, and both when AI and machine learning and big data is going to affect it, but also when we will start being able to implement it and extend lifespan, lower our biological age, extend the span within we operate as human beings. I think things are going to change dramatically, and I know so up to like 2018, 2017, 2018. I was sitting on some think tanks w- within allopathic medicine, and I can tell you that back then, even large insurance companies were talking about this is the type of like an event horizon that they cannot predict, or they're very afraid of what's going to happen once big data is implemented. Even 2016, once big data is implemented into real life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're seeing with even some of the studies we're doing now. I think we're at a crossroads where we're seeing the excel in the AI and the machine learning
Yeah.
and epigenetics at the
Hmm.
same time. So what we're actually using to look at the biological aging, very plainly, it's how we're expressing our genes. Really, everything we're doing and how we're interacting with our environment is what's going to express some genes and not express others. But with those kind of two powerful forces together, I think we're only limited by two things, which is the size of the data set, because you need
Yeah.
computing power, and that can take a long time to really dig into it, to look into the data. And then number two, our imagination.
Yeah.
Like, that's really the limit, because there are so many things we can do with these extremely powerful technologies. We need to get the best people in the room. And that expands from your researcher who's doing bench work in the lab, looking at these markers, but even to, us in the field
Hmm.
creating these products or creating these diagnostic tools, because we're actually doing the commercialization of the research. Then furthermore, to the clinicians that we work with. I know you all at Young Boost work with a ton of clinicians. So actually being able to say, hey, this is how you use this product. This is how it helps out our end patient.
Yeah.
So it's a cycle, and every single person in that cycle is extremely important to bringing, in my world, those two technologies together. But we're going
Yeah.
to see really some revolutionizing reports, because I think nowadays too, when you get into a lot of these diagnostic tools, there's too many biomarkers, right? And that's super overwhelming to the end consumer. We're working on actually creating and developing an app, because I think one of the lowest hanging fruits you can actually be able to create for the end user is a way to digest that information.
Hmm.
And you
Yeah.
can't do that with hundreds of biomarkers. You can maybe save your report and pop it into AI and chat
Yeah.
GPT and say, hey, give me some recommendations. But even then, all of your data points are in different places. So
Yes.
um, that's the goal. Yeah.
For sure. So to your point, I'll agree with you in two areas. Number one, what we care about is less to tell you the story of um, of your biological age or biological skin age, as far as like I would say, as far as like I told you so type scenario, right? This is pretty cool for us as a company. We have had some people going to the more like visual diagnostics tools like Visia, and the Visia showing them, hey, yes, you are now visually 2 years younger or whatever. But for us, it's more about like empowering the clinician, and we are going to launch a metabolomics test, which is a more nitty gritty, I would say, like again, like cellular capacity test, to which we're going to tie different uh, products to say, hey, if you're lacking or those metabolomes are less than optimal, this is what you can use. And I think everyone knows we talk about spermidine a lot, so spermidine is one of them. But I'm going to agree with something else that are within the biomarkers, or for us, the more biomarkers we're going to measure there, the less we're going to be accurate. So from the ability to measure 200 something biomarkers, we only are measuring 17. Not because we are, I'm not on air, but what makes me laugh a lot is different companies offering like a genetic test, but measuring like 5 SNPs, right? Like so it's not because we're trying to be economical in our measurement, rather we're trying to be very accurate with our measurements. So I agree with you in both areas there 100%. And talking about skin specific, a lot of people who listen to this podcast obviously are obsessed with slowing down skin aging. Obviously I am obsessed with it from a from a from a research standpoint, but that's why most people tune into this podcast. So how does biological aging show up in the skin?
Oh yeah.
I think, people see people like, I'm not going to name any names that I'm going to meet later, but let's say Wim Hof. We hear that a lot. This guy is, doing ice baths every day. Poor guy. Half the comments on YouTube are, "But you look old," right? And we hear it about other people in the field. Obviously, I don't want to name names, but how does so what is the relationship there between like biological aging in general and skin aging?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I will say you if you look at someone, yes, you can it's so subjective, right? We all have kind of opinions and different feelings on if what makes someone look older, what characteristics. You definitely say the more
yeah,
wrinkles or kind of the gray hair, etc. I think most people would probably agree on those, but we absolutely know that accelerated aging, demonstrated by any of the epigenetic clocks we're looking at, um, is going to result in an older looking phenotype. And again, you can define older in a lot of different
yeah,
ways, but one that I will bring to light is a really great clock. I'm sure, hopefully, maybe most of your listeners are familiar with it. It's called the Dunedin Pace algorithm. This is one that doesn't give you an age, like a true biological age. It gives you a rate of aging
yeah,
compared to a speedometer. So the range is from zero point 0.6 to 1.4. If you're at 1, you're kind of in the middle there. You're aging 1 biological year for every 1 chronological year, and you want to be as low as possible.
yeah,
And the way they created this clock was super interesting. They basically took about 1,100 people from Dunedin, New Zealand, and followed them all the way from when they were 3 years old to 53 years old. They're still studying the group today. They were born in 1972 and 1973. So it's just fascinating. What they did along the way was take all the facial imaging and scans that you could ever imagine. So they actually had the same group of people. They lived in Dunedin. They were exposed to the same things for the most part. They lived the same type of lifestyle. And what you could see, I could send this image if you want to put it out there in a blog or something later. What you can see is the people who had the slowest speedometer, the slowest rate of aging, looked super young. Then you had people who had the average, they were around that one area. They looked a little older than the slower people, but then you had people who had really fast paces of aging, and they just looked way older. I mean, way older, more wrinkles, more defined lines,
yeah,
more sagginess of the face, I would say. So that Dunedin pace metric, we actually have true evidence, uh, facial evidence, images of the faces that appear to look older. So I think that one is really interesting. And I'm just talking about broad aging clocks, biological
yeah.
age clocks, right? I'm not even getting into some of the really cool science where we can even take a sample from your skin. And
Hmm.
we'll talk about kind of what we've seen with development of skin aging clocks. But there's a clear connection. And it's a way to treat aging from the inside out, right? Because again, you could look super young, but maybe there's some cellular damage still from the
Yeah.
past from not taking care of yourself. So we
So
do see a clear connection.
yes, and I know, and I know that the main issue with, I would say, like portable, usable, like app based
Mm,
applications are mainly due to interface, or mainly due to the ability to take consistent photos and things like that. Like these things are being developed as we speak, to the extent that there was an attempt by a Chinese company. I don't know what's going on with them now, but I think it was 2015 when they started. They were trying to even infer internal biological aging and infer different, ongoing aging scenarios due to the way that the skin ages. And I know they were, what was messing them up again was the ability to for the user to take
right.
consistent photos.
Yeah, I know for me, I forget again what app it was. It was something like that.
Yeah.
And I naturally have very greasy, oily skin, even without, any moisturizer or makeup or anything. I just always have had that. And obviously when you take those photos with those apps, you want to be in clean lighting. You want it to be a clear image. But you're still going to get some type of shadows depending on where you take the photo.
Yeah.
So I took a photo, submitted it, got all my results, and your kind of wrinkle depth, your elasticity, your collagen percentage, all these things are estimating based on this photo. And then I just turned my face a different direction and submitted kind of same photo that day and got completely different results. Right. So you do have to be a little bit careful. Then there are correlations and connections with those apps, but I think to really, really dive into the skin age, how you're performing, you do need that validated, peer-reviewed research on it,
Yeah.
where you can take a sample. And then today, I don't know of anyone who's commercializing something like that now. There definitely will be in the future. There's a lot of really, really exciting undergoing developments happening, but
Yeah.
um, I hear you. I've experienced what you're explaining firsthand myself.
Yeah. So how do you take it to the next level as far as skin aging testing? I know you guys have something very
Yeah.
interesting. So how do you take that again? I think it's a very it can tell a lot about decision making in a company. How do you take your ability even to look into someone's data and then extrapolate it to something like skin aging?
Of course. Yeah. So let's go back to the basics, right?
Yeah.
Why is the skin age important? And I think we can already do that with our baseline epigenetic biological age clocks. So we want to assess our skin health and longevity. We want to use personalized skincare and treatments. We want to evaluate really our environmental and lifestyle impacts,
Yeah.
right? Do we need to change what we're doing? But number four, I would say the most important and why people even test in the first place is because you want to monitor the effectiveness
Yeah.
of skincare interventions, right? You want to say, am I doing the right thing? And this is more where you get into longitudinal tracking of epigenetic skin aging. Um, and look at everything you're taking from retinoids to peptides, NAD boosters, etc. So I think there's a way where a specific epigenetic skin clock can look at, on cellular level, certain sites, what we measure in our lab, if it's associated with collagen production, oxidative stress, inflammation, barrier function, all of those are tied together. And we
Yeah.
can correlate those metrics. And you know this better than me, you're an expert with clinical skin metrics such as maybe the face scans you're doing in practice, such as wrinkle depth, elasticity, hydration, and then taking all of that information and recommending targeted products and treatments that directly address the patient's skin needs. Because at the end of the day, that's why we do testing. We want it to be actionable. We want it to say, are we going in the right direction?
Hmm.
Um, so those are some of the things that come to mind. There's other areas where again we can maybe identify hyperpigmentation, uneven skin tones, and start to really tailor product recommendations based on those results. I still think we're pretty far away from that for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Just because you need the clinical trials behind it, you need to see what works and what doesn't, and it's very individualized.
Yeah.
Um, so even if it's a while until we get to those, you can still do an N-of-1 test on yourself and say, okay, this is what's working for me. So the future vision is being able to integrate what we've talked about, the
Yeah.
AI and epigenetics for future skincare by doing epigenetic testing results, by having skin analysis tools like the AI-based imaging, and then having product matched algorithms that
Yeah.
say, hey, these are the best combinations of ingredients and treatments
Yeah.
based off of what we're seeing.
And but not to be confused, by the way. So there is a bunch of companies. I know of three. One is a skincare company, and two are service providers. That what they will
Mm,
do, they will say, "Hey, let's do a cheek swab. Let's basically do like a DNA test, and then we'll be able to tell you what products you need to use, basically for the rest of your life." Right?
mhm,
That is not necessarily what we're talking about, because and maybe I would like you to explain
mhm.
why there is a difference between your genetic predispositions and your epigenetics or what's going on now, etc. Like, how would you explain it to someone that is asking you,
Mhm.
oh, should I do this test?
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'll give a personal example for me. So I do all the texting. I believe, I want all the information about my body. That's just who I am as a person. So I've done genetic testing I actually have a particular location called the APOE34
Yeah.
variant. So I'm at increased risk for Alzheimer's. My grandmother passed away from it. I knew I had that predisposition. That's my genetics. I can't change that. I got 50% from my mom, 50% from my dad. It's stagnant. And that's still very powerful to understand and know your genetics. It does give you information about yourself. But it's what we see less and less clinicians doing it because you can't change it.
Yeah.
Whereas with the epigenetic testing, actually these markers are changeable. You get some from you can inherit a little bit of this to an extent. Um, it makes up 80% of your health outcomes, where genetics only makes up 20%, and you're in control of it.
Yeah.
So it puts the power back into your hands. And actually, there are things I can do to mitigate my APOE34 expression levels, right? Like
Yeah.
not consuming alcohol, doing all the lifestyle factors, we're supposed to be
Yeah.
doing, but even estrogen supplementation.
Hmm.
So then there's more and more we're learning about being able to control the expression of our genes rather than changing the genes ourselves, because we can't do that unless we're doing some crazy gene editing, which costs a lot and is still under investigation, which yeah, it's out there still.
Yeah.
It's a possibility. I think it will be in the future. So epigenetics, you're in charge, you're changing, you're getting real-time feedback from, let's say, the skincare routine you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Or the products you're deciding on using. So I'm glad you asked that. There's a difference, and this is where you see it all over social media. Like, you're not your DNA, or you are what you eat, or food is medicine. All of those quotes are really describing epigenetics without
Yeah.
saying this is epigenetics.
Yes, I agree with you. I think one of the examples, it's out there. It's a very boy example, but a pig that you
Mhm.
have in a kennel, or yeah, I think that's how the pigs, that's where they live, their house anyway. And wild boar is actually the same animal genetically, but
Mm.
the epigenetics determine, tusks, fur, whatever, behavior, aggression, form of face, everything. It is all about the epigenetics. That if you look at the DNA level, that's the same animal, and if you release that animal, or if you make it grow in the wild and vice versa, it becomes the other animal. So just, I think this is like an
There's
out there example. It's a very boy example, as I said.
No, I like that. I like that example, actually. I don't know, like, it makes obviously is a great example. I don't know that I've really ever heard that one,
Yeah, yeah.
um, at least very frequently. But another great example is like twins. Take
Hmm.
identical twins, for
Yeah.
example. Genetically, they are the exact same. It's so funny because at TruDiagnostic, we have, I think, like, we're up to 3 or 4 sets of identical twins. We actually have
Wow.
working in TruDiagnostic. Like, one of the twins works here, not both of them.
If it
And
was according to genetics, you would have had to pay salary also for the other one, by the way.
right, right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So genetically they're exact same, but right, they are experiencing completely different environments. So
Yeah.
their epigenetics is very different. Their biological ages are going to be different. Their skin aging is going to be different
Yeah.
depending on where they lived and what they're exposed to. So yeah, I like the animal example, but the twins is just kind of your classic uh, science example as well.
Yeah. Well, I love it. So going back to like biological age testing, do you think right now a biological, let's say you do biological age testing throughout your life, and maybe we can talk about how often people should do it. Um, can you tell how well a skincare routine? By the way, when I say skincare, it's including interventions, right? Like it's including professional treatments and stuff like that. Can
Mhm.
we infer how well something is working at the moment? So, for example, like if someone used, you mentioned like retinol, peptides, NAD, would we be able to see a difference in their biological markers over time?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and to answer your question, how often should you do this? I think everyone starting off should do it probably quarterly if
Uh
you
huh.
really wanted to get granular.
Hmm.
After you start to do it quarterly, maybe even just for a year or so. Then do it every 6 months. Start to understand how your markers are moving, how you're able to change them in the direction you wish to see. And then just do it for maintenance, maybe at least once a year after
Hmm.
that. But
Okay.
we mainly work with healthcare providers in that integrative functional medicine space that are all cash pay.
Yeah.
We have a lot of dermatologists that we work with, or people who do have aesthetic based clinics and want to see the effects of their treatments before and after. I was just on a call before this, actually. It was an internal call speaking with our VP of sales. And I was talking about one of the clinics that's a plastic surgery clinic. And they test every single patient before and after all of their surgeries.
Yeah.
You're getting enough time in between to heal from the surgery. But they're also, on a certain interventional treatment plan with different serums, creams, what have you in between. Um, so it's really interesting, and we're seeing reductions. I'm excited to do a larger clinical analysis on that plastic surgery clinic,
Hmm.
but we'll see. We're collecting a lot of data right now.
Yeah. It reminds me, Dr. Cameron Chestnut. He's in Spokane, Washington. They do insane things around that. Shout out to Chestnut. C5 is the name of their integrated place. Anyway, I think one of the coolest things about biological age testing is how you can predict like future health risks, which you kind of touched on. Um, what are some of the things? So you mentioned ApoE34. This is due to genetic run-of-the-mill genetic testing. But what
Mhm.
what kind of things can a true diagnostic test detect that is different, and like how does like knowing something like that help someone make better health choices? Because it's fun to say, yeah, you should do all the lifestyle choices, but what I've learned also on myself and also on tens of thousands of users of our products.
Mhm.
Yes, you want to give someone you want to assume someone's going to do the maximum, but sometimes you got to also allow to do the minimum. Not everyone is as
Oh
passionate
yeah.
about fill in the blank, right? So what diagnostically can we infer that is different, and then how can it allow us to address or pinpoint the interventions that we really need to do?
Yeah, so just first off, great question, MJ. But second off, to answer that directly, um, aging is, I've said it, I think, already on this podcast several times, aging is that number one risk factor for every single chronic disease and death,
Yeah.
right? Even regardless of cancer, heart disease, COVID-19, which are like
Yeah.
major killers, especially at the peak of 2020.
You could
So,
even say, by the way, I just gotta give you like extra points there, like extra credit. A lot of the things that we think of as drivers of death of disease are actually at a young age are safety mechanisms that are gone awry with aging. So I could not agree with you more.
yeah, yeah. No, I love that quote. And the statistic that I just mentioned, that is pulled from Dr. Matt Caberline on Twitter. He basically combined all of that public health data and created some really interesting charts around aging. So shout out and kudos to him for that.
Yeah.
But epigenetics is everything. Remember, these changes occur in response to our environmental factors,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, the diet, stress, toxins, aging, lifestyle, and this directly influences our disease susceptibility and overall health. So, first off, you just got to get into the habit of testing. And a lot of our
Yeah.
practitioners do this as a baseline on their patients with their CBC panel, with their hormones, with their genetics as well. Pile everything together. And what I've learned is a lot of providers do this to get their patients something tangible to say, hey, if you're, let's just use someone who's older. It's easier to interpret results that are
Yeah.
older because they have more things they need to work on biologically. So hey, you're biologically older right now compared to your chronological age. We need to work on these things if you're not working on these things, your trajectory is going to be this increase
Yeah.
for these diseases and even death. So it almost goes back to like, oh, wow, right?
Yeah.
I need to actually look at myself, look at my habits, look at what I'm doing. And it turns, I don't know, it's weird to say, it turns your reality into something that's like actual, it's real.
Yeah.
I have this app on my phone called Way of Life where I put like meditation, um, alcohol consumption, working out. I think those are the only three I have on there because you have to pay for more. But all I do every day is yes or no. So you
Wow.
can look at your habits over time and you're like, oh, I'm just consuming alcohol on the weekends when my friends come into town. And then you're like, well, wait, my friends come into town every single weekend. I'm consuming alcohol every weekend. That's
Yeah.
this many days out of the year. And you're like, whoa, what am I doing? So, and obviously, more alcohol consumption leads to higher biological aging, more meditation, more working out, decreases your biological aging. So then you can kind of reflect and look and make changes in your life. And that's what the epigenetic testing, the biological aging testing serves us to.
I love it. Yeah. Way of life. I'm gonna write it down.
Yeah,
It's good.
it's so simple, but it's a
Yeah.
good one.
I do. I don't know if people know who Jocko Willink is. Wrote a bunch of books, and he has a. Okay, one second. Let's see. Sorry. So apparently,
No worries.
so this is great. I mean, to be honest, so Jocko Willink is a he wrote a bunch of leadership books, Navy SEAL, blah blah blah. But what's interesting that he starts by explaining that you are, first of all, your own leader, and you need to make decisions that I would say push your own limits. And he has a very extensive chart um, that I follow, and every day even though I think I did really well, I learned. First of all, I learned two things. First of all, I learned that I should be realistic about the grading I give myself, let's say to the positive, but to the negative, really that everything is a work in progress. Like after a while, after even a week, you stop beating yourself down for all the bad decisions you've made, and you understand that you know, decisions have passed, and you learn from them for the future. I think you only can do it through consistent struggle or note taking, whatever you want to call that. Awesome. Okay. I have so many more questions and I want to make sure I get to them. Um, let's talk about some health risk predictions and longevity. Um, uh, we have our biological markers. How many of them would you say are specifically relating to skin aging? Like, can we pinpoint why some people get more wrinkles or loss of elasticity earlier than others?
Yeah, I think we're getting there.
Okay.
I think right now it's hard to pinpoint because your epigenetic markers are going to be changeable. Your genetics are not. Um, a lot of that depends. Oh, some of it may be heritable, right? But
Yeah.
we know that people who smoke and
Yes.
drink a lot, right? You could start to see the changes in their skin dramatically, or people who get more sun exposure. It's a healthy
Yes.
balance. You need sun exposure, but not too much. So if we're talking about the science behind wrinkles, right? This is a structural breakdown, loss of function, and more of your skin's extracellular matrix.
Yeah.
And this consists of collagen, your firmness and your structure, your elastin, maintaining that skin elasticity, your hyaluronic acid levels, your hydrating and plumping the skin. So as we age, these components degrade due
Hmm.
to epigenetic changes
Yeah.
because you're engaging in some of those lifestyle things, oxidative stress, environmental factors, which lead to ultimately the fine lines, the wrinkles, the deep, the depth of those wrinkles and sagging as well. So there's definitely genes we know that are associated with those. So I think it would be really interesting to perform a study looking at the expression of those particular
Or like
genes,
FOXO3 or
right?
whatever. And and then just seeing what
Yeah.
we can do there, right?
Yeah, there's some collagen and elastin production
Yeah,
genes.
yeah.
Um,
Call A1 to
mhm,
4 HAS, which is a hyaluronic acid gene. We have a very interesting group of genes that are called LUM. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a lumicans, and lumicans are like the brick layers of collagen, and these really like
mhm,
are really bad at maintaining integrity as you grow older, and
mhm.
especially around like senescent cells, etc., or inflammation, oxidative stress. And this is, yeah, very interesting.
Yeah,
I think, again, the question is how much of it is the future and how much of it is a general discussion of aging, and then just skin aging is a function of that. Um,
definitely.
so based on the data um, that you've seen, what are the biggest things that accelerate aging, both obviously inside and out?
Yeah, I think it depends what route you want to go.
Yeah,
The top factors that accelerate aging by far, I think is inflammation,
yeah,
chronic inflammation, and that's where we get the inflammaging. And there are things that make this worse, obviously, right? Your processed foods, your sugars, the oils, fried food, chronic stress, poor sleep, your gut microbiome imbalances. We can target those things. We can, you know, engage in anti-inflammatory diets, fasting, caloric restrictions, supplements, your resveratrol, curcumin, more of NAD-based molecules. Um, as it relates to skin, again, more UV radiation and photo aging, right? If people are using tanning beds, the excessive sun exposure, pollution, UV exposure,
yeah,
but reversing that with your SPF, your vitamin C and E, your serums, your red light therapy, your retinoids. Um, High sugar,
yeah,
glycation, smoking, pollution. So really going back to those lifestyle factors, those accelerate the most because we're doing them every day, right? It,
yeah,
it compounds over time. So
yeah,
it really is doing the simple things, having a really great habitual routine and sticking with that. That's what's going to build that up. We know there are people who are really old chronologically and they look fabulous, right?
yeah,
Their skin looks glowing, they're glowing. And it's because they are doing those small things just daily, every
yes.
day. And it's a
That
non-negotiable for them.
I agree, and I think we kind of talked about Wim Hof, which is the inverse of that, but
Yeah.
um, and then we apparently have to wrap up. But okay, so I agree with you. I think a lot of it is that the skin we can just work on the lowest common denominator there, which obviously we can we were and that's kind of a lot of what I wanted to ask you, which is like, what a- what are we sacrificing? Like, we're doing a lot of stimulation for cellular turnover, things like that, but there are things that we can measure that actually are in the background are being exacerbated. For example, like if we stimulate more and more cellular turnover, are we shortening our telomeres? Like, are we drawing on reservoirs that are kind of our future reservoirs, and if we're trying to then live longer, 100 years, 120 years, if you ask Aubrey de Grey, 850 years, like, are we at the end going to pay the price there?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the magical questions where we don't have the answer, right?
Yeah,
But these epigenetic, these biological age clocks are a universal tool that we can now use and say, hey, here's what we're seeing in a really short period of time because we don't have forever,
yeah,
right? You and I aren't going to be alive forever. Hopefully, you know, future generations get the wisdom from this podcast and everything we've been talking about to apply it to their research. But we're not going to be around forever. So we can't conduct these 40-year longitudinal
yeah,
trials and wait, to test one product. We need to
yeah.
use these biological aging tools now. We know they're predictive of more outcomes. So I think it's a great place to start, but I think we're going to see a lot of growth in this field as well because of, again, the revolution with AI, the large learning models, and just epigenetics, what we're able to measure.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, so to wrap this up, if someone needs to start, whether they are starting or whether they want to, add this to their longevity journey, how can people go and learn more about True Diagnostics, or where can they find a provider? How can people start the journey within that sphere?
Of course, if you're interested in testing, head to TruDiagnostic.com. It's just TRU and then diagnostic is singular. And reach out to our support team. We'll connect with the provider if you want to go, through a provider, which I think is always a great solution and something I'd recommend to really help you integrate this into your lifestyle. It's just support SUPPORT at TruDiagnostic.com.
Cool. And people can also get the tests and have the test run the test themselves. Send it back to
Yes.
you. Cool.
Yes, absolutely. You can do this all by yourself, and we'll give you actionable recommendations on the reporting as well.
Awesome. Hannah, listen, this was fantastic. You are a treasure trove
Yeah.
of knowledge. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Amy. I appreciate your time.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Bye.